Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 6 of SaaS Monday, live on Friday. We have a really great session today, led by three amazing SaaS startup leaders in Omnistrate, Checkly, and Plotline. And so I do kind of want to just kind of jump into that. But to set the stage a little, what we're going to be talking about today is verticalization or selling SaaS into verticals. But in reality, you can also just kind of look at that as specialization. And so as you go to market with your SaaS solution, what you're going to spend a lot of time hearing about, talking about your ideal customer profile. And is when you start figuring out who your ideal customer profile is and what they look like, you'll find they kind of group together in some kind of vertical or some kind of segment. And sometimes it's going to be an easy to find segment like finance or healthcare, where you know it's obvious, and sometimes it's going to be a little bit more niche, or sometimes it's going to be something a little bit more broad in terms of technology people in general. And so as it relates to that conversation, we have three very good founders here to talk you through their story in terms of how they got there and the lessons they've learned along the way. And so with that, let's actually start with kind of the introductions. And so Daniel, can you kind of jump in and explain the Checkly story and how you got here and kind of set the stage?
Sure, happy to do that. So, hey everyone, I'm Daniel from Checkly, and short disclaimer, so I'm not one of the founders actually. I joined right after the Series A, right? So it was pretty early in the journey, but I'm not an original founder. So I work at Checkly as the VP of engineering now, right? And back when I joined, we were basically a very small company, I think like 5 or 6 people, and now we have scaled up to 50 people. We have raised our Series B funding round, and it's going pretty well for us, right? So it has been an extremely exciting 4 years. And then what Checkly does is we build monitoring for developers. So Checkly can be used to build REST API monitoring, but then also web application monitoring using Playwright, right? So if you've ever written an end-to-end test in your life for web applications, right, you know that it's really great to test your critical flows and important features. And then Checkly comes in with the idea that, hey, once you've written all of these end-to-end tests, you can also use them for production monitoring, right, and test on production. So you can basically make sure that the critical user flows of your web apps always work. Right, and we do this on a global scale, so you can monitor your application from, I think, 22 different regions. And we are focused on making the developer experience really great, right, which is one of our strong points. So if you're an engineer, you can build monitoring that really scales well and combine testing and monitoring.
Love it. And while we're there, actually, Marcus, can you introduce yourself, as well as you work with a lot of AWS startups, a lot of startups in EMEA, and a lot of startups who obviously depend on AWS as you're an AWS specialist. While you're there, can you talk about why you were excited to invite Checkly here and what kind of why they're doing so many things right?
Yeah, happy to do so. So for those who don't know me, I'm Marcus. I'm a solutions architect. I'm working with AWS. And I'm in the segment where we look especially after startups. And what is really cool, and especially with the Checkly story that Daniel hopefully can share a little bit throughout this episode, is when these startups really gain traction in the market. So first of all, of course, they need to find a good product market fit. But then it's not given that they really scale to the extent that Checkly has, experienced and been able to do. Because there are a lot of things have to come together, right? As you said, Michael, they need to have a really good idea of who the person is that they are selling to in terms of, profile, in terms of company, in terms of country, potentially even. And but once all these kind of things that get sorted, and we can help or can work together on, also bring the technical side to a situation where it scales well as the the sales side of the house, then we, occasionally, not always, of course, see really a company thriving. And I believe that Checkly is one of such an example.
Excellent. And so we're going to dive in and explore that a little bit more as we go. But let me also then introduce Ardesh. And so, do you actually want to explain, Plotline, your story, and kind of how you guys got here? Because we were really excited to invite you here, and we think you've got a really compelling story too.
Cool, thanks. Hi, folks. I'm really excited to be here. I'm the founder of Plotline. So Plotline is a company which helps mobile apps launch dynamic experiences in minutes. So if you take any mobile app, a B2C consumer app, the marketing teams there want to run a lot of experiments in the app. But to do so, it takes a lot of time traditionally. They would go to the developer, get them to launch a new feature. That would take 2 weeks of time. And then because it's an app, you'll have to update the app in the app store and all your users have to update it. So the whole experiment cycle takes a month or longer. But with Plotline, they are able to launch these experiences in minutes. So we help marketing teams make the apps dynamic by running a lot of such experiments. So our customers are primarily gaming and fintech apps who have a lot of users. So these are apps which have up to from 1 million to about 50, 60 million users on their platform. And today we serve customers across India, US, Southeast Asia, a few in Europe. And we handle roughly like 1 to 2 billion API calls a day.
Excellent. And again, compelling story. And I think there's a lot of lessons that we can learn here from that conversation. And then, so if you're new to our thread, let me introduce you to Kamal. If you're not, then you've actually seen him before. So Kamal is the CEO and one of the two founders at Omnistrate. He helped, his journey started at AWS way back when. And so if you kind of understand the history of SaaS, there's a lot of good and bad about the history you can blame on Kamal. So, and I do on a regular basis. But Kamal, do you want to tell a little bit about the Omnistrate story and how we got here?
Yeah, absolutely. As Michael mentioned, AWS long veteran, spent 12 years at AWS, spent some time at Confluent. My journey has been, one thing has been common, that I worked with stateful systems. The other thing that is common is that I've worked a lot about bringing the stateful systems to the cloud. And, after doing it a dozen times, I realized that there is a process to the madness, I guess, and we can have a platform that can make it easy for everyone to build their SaaS products. So we started tinkering with that idea and brought a solution to the market. We're essentially helping companies build their SaaS products quickly and helping them with not only from multi-tenancy aspects, but also deployments and managing infrastructure and billing aspects, and what it takes, basically the Lego blocks of a typical SaaS product. So it's more of a things that are needed in addition to your core application in order to go live and build a successful SaaS product, a successful SaaS business around it. So that's what we do.
Excellent. And so if we want to kind of jump in on the topic, Daniel, you mentioned you joined right after Series A and have obviously kind of watched this explosive growth. With that explosive growth, I'm sure you've seen a lot of more and more specific and requests and concerns and requirements for your customer. I'm sure early on in that topic, it was mostly reactive, where the customer said this and you said, okay, this is what I got to go do. Now that you guys are at where you're at, have you got to a spot where you're now proactive and thinking ahead? And if so, what does that look like? Or are we still kind of, as it relates to customer responses and the nuances of those customer responses, if you can kind of talk through what those were, as well as, have you figured out how to get to proactive yet? Or are we still in that reactive or the customer's demanding?
Actually, I think that the journey was quite interesting because Checkly started out as a product-led growth company, right? So we had a very successful self-service plan initially. And what's interesting about that is that it is kind of difficult sometimes to figure out how to increase your product market fit, right? Because many of the self-service customers, they won't even talk to you. You try to reach out to them. Some of them will, but it's really, really difficult to find enough users that are so engaged that they will just tell you what you need to do, right? So that was the challenges in the early days, and we are basically doing a lot of experimentation, trying different features, building different things, and then using Mixpanel and product analytics heavily to try and understand like what moves the needle here, right? And this has actually changed over the years significantly. When so we always had, or later we had a free plan and you could get a trial, and then at some point we saw a lot of success with large companies, right? So today among our customers is LinkedIn, for example. They're a pretty heavy user of the product. And the interesting thing is, the more customers like that we got, the more we could grow our product management discipline, right? Because suddenly we had very engaged customers, very technical, challenging our product in ways that we didn't even anticipate before. And now we're having all kinds of conversations like this. And like I will tell you, let me think, what can I say? So what happens, right? So we have, for example, we're working with a large bank and they run intense security testing, right? And now we have been, like I said, a Series A startup at the time, and maybe not everything in the architecture was as perfect as it should have been. And they run an automated security testing at 2 a.m. in the morning. It finds a resource that we hadn't put a limit on and breaks the entire platform. And we had an incident response, like an incident, of course, and then um, I was personally part of it, and we restored service over like 2 or 3 hours, trying to figure out what was going on. And these are things when you really need to go into proactive, right? And then really look at, okay, obviously we have a new kind of customers now, right? Like they do things like this. They suddenly will scale up in ways that we haven't seen before. And this is when you start thinking ahead, right? And you start making plans. Okay, what else could they do, right? Like you do more serious risk assessment, and you look at the product to make it more resilient, and also to scale up. And then on the product side of things, I will say what's interesting is that we have a lot of these customers right now, and they bring in a lot of requirements, right? Checkly has been always very transparent, and we've always had a public roadmap where all of our users could give us their feedback. But with our larger customers, we have separate Slack channels, so it's a very active communication now, which is really cool to see. And they bring their individual problems that they have with the platform, right? So they always give us feedback and talk about bugs that they see or missing things. And I think what really helps us to be more proactive is have a pretty strong product team and a pretty strong product discipline, right? So where we look actually for customer problems rather than trying to build every individual feature request that comes in. Because I think this is actually quite important. For example, we're working on a new initiative right now that is about to ship, and this is basically us gathering, I think, like 6, 7, or 8 really big customer problems that we didn't want to fix individually, but we kind of made it into a whole new feature, right? Because we saw like, here are the patterns, this is what we see in support tickets coming in, this is what we see from our large enterprise customers, and they all kind of align. And this is how we build a consistent vision to develop Checkly into the future, if that makes sense.
It makes a lot of sense, and it actually sounds very ideal, where you have, large, big name customers, and they're willing to, help you develop along the way. I know there's a lot of startups out there that would love to be in your guys' space. So congrats on that, on getting to that spot. Ardesh, on the Plotline side, where are you guys at on, in terms of your description sounded like you have a really clear product market fit. How'd you get there? So same space. I mean, so how'd you, what was that journey, and what was your decisions, and what was your learnings in getting to that spot?
Right. So what we noticed was we initially started off as a survey tool. So we would help customers run surveys inside the apps to collect user feedback. So they would ask questions like, hey, you added this thing to the cart, but you didn't check out. What was the reason? right? And they would try to understand, okay, was it because, okay, they didn't like the product, they didn't like the discounts that they got, or they were not sure how to go ahead and check out, or that whole process seemed a bit cumbersome, right? So they would run a lot of these research surveys inside the app. And as we started observing how customers were using this product, we started noticing that a lot of times they would ask leading questions in the surveys to get the user to perform an action in the app. So they were sort of using these surveys indirectly to route the user to different sections or make them aware that a discount exists. Like questions like, did you know that we offer a 10% discount if you add 2 more products? And people would say, oh, I didn't know that. And they would say, okay, here's the button to go and actually do that. And people would convert and sort of take that action, right? So this is what we learned, and we sort of leverage this to sort of add more experiences. So instead of just letting them use a survey to do that, we started doing a lot more things. So we added like Instagram like stories that these apps could launch without any developer effort. We could add widgets inside the app. We could now we go to the extent of controlling the homepage for a lot of apps. So the entire homepage is fully customized based on who the user is, what are their past activities in the app, and what he's most suited for doing next. So that increases their retention and engagement by quite a lot.
That makes a lot of sense too.
Yeah. So I think as part of this, what we learned over time was all these mobile app companies that we work with, they value 3 things a lot. One is reliability. So this is something that's affecting the end consumer experience. It's something that when these users open the app, that's the first thing that they see. Right? So reliability is extremely important. So whatever they configure on our portal, it should look exactly like that. So the design, how clearly the corner radius looks, how it varies across devices should match exactly. Second is performance. There should be no delays, right? Imagine you're opening an app and it takes 10 seconds for some page to load. People would not use it. You need like sub-second latencies, anything that you do. And third thing is cost. So these are again companies who have a lot of users, who generate a lot of events, a lot of campaigns. So everything is a lot of scale, a lot of data moving around. So they value cost. Right? It should not be something that scales exorbitantly as the number of users increase. They need to keep the cost in check. And directly or indirectly, we also need to do that. We can't use tools which make it like super expensive to move around data here and there, because we would have to charge them a very high amount at the end of the day.
That makes sense. And so it sounds like both of you guys had a lot of success getting very constructive and very good feedback from your customers, and you learned from them what they wanted and then rewarded them by just adding more features to your system. I am curious, have you ever actually been able to predict them ahead of time? So, or is it always kind of have a hypothesis, test the hypothesis by putting it in front of a customer and then coming back online? So have you been able to outguess your customer from time to time?
Maybe I can take a shot at it first. Not earlier, when we were new to this market, I think it was about trying a lot of different things. But now we see patterns of how customers use our product, what works with the end customers. So we are able to predict that with a lot of confidence that, if we launch this feature, all these customers will definitely use it and see value. And because we also have access to a lot of customers, it becomes really easy to validate. Like even without building, we just shoot a message to our customers and all of them are fairly open to trying out new things. And they quickly tell us, hey, okay, I'm interested to try this, or I'm not interested to try this.
It's actually a very good question. Have we been able to outguess our customers? I guess we have, but some of the early features, which is kind of interesting, right? Like we have one feature that is completely mind-blowing to me. Like we have a feature that we call private locations. So I think it was back in 2021 when we thought it's probably interesting for customers to also run monitoring from inside their own infrastructure, right? So usually Checkly monitors things that are public, so public websites, public APIs, but then especially bigger customers, they sometimes need to monitor inside of their own premises. And then we built this feature. Initially, it was very small scope, and it didn't pick up a lot back then, right? So we had maybe 1 or 2 users, but then surprisingly, we are now absolutely surprised by the success of this feature, like in the long run. So over the course of 4 years, now we have, like I said, right, LinkedIn, I think they have almost the majority of their entire monitoring happening on private locations, right? And this is something where we kind of built a feature that would work out in years ahead, right? Which was very interesting. It was not a hit with the self-service user base for sure, but then with the enterprise customer class, it just picked up like crazy. So we're actually now planning a version 2 of it because it's that popular, right? And we have gathered a ton of user requests for it. Yeah, I guess that was one. Yeah.
Now, one thing I've heard from both of you, and I know from Kamal, because in some of in previous episodes he's kind of talked through, the benefit of having a couple of large customers is amazing because you get a lot of feedback. They put a lot of oil through the pipes, but you can also kind of get lost in that one customer. And so, Kamal, can you kind of explain, because we've kind of all kind of got to the kind of nirvana. Well, we have customers and we're getting our feedback from our customers. But there is that little bit of stage where, I've got one customer. How do I get to 2, 3, or 4? And so, that Omnistrate was, blessed because you came with a ton of experience in the market. And you also then kind of came out the door with one, fairly large and successful customer who was using the platform. But then there's that struggle of, okay, so I know this works. I know it works for one customer. How do I kind of start getting it to work for others, and the kind of the learnings that you can do and without that direct customer feedback? I mean, you get the sales call, but that's about it.
100%. I think I will just echo some of the points that Adarsh and Daniel have made, right? Like, I think it's very, very important, generally just broadly, just broad stroke, to have as a startup to, especially if you are in a SaaS startup, and that's really the power of the SaaS, right? To you continuously discover, continuously get insights, and really get the customer feedback that you can live and thrive and essentially guide your roadmap accordingly. To your point, I think the question really comes down to just doing some of the basics, right? Like, for example, when you're doing things for one customer, are you doing it as a consulting work? Are you doing it like as a one-off thing? Or are you building as a proper product feature, proper platform that you can be enabled for others, right? So I think the question that needs to be asked, like, when you're prioritizing one feature or any one particular customer, do you have a conviction? Do you have insights from? And you may not have other customers using it. You don't need 10 design partners, but the one design partner that you have you done at least a validation and talk to other customers in getting their feedback? Would that be valuable to them, right? And so that's an easy thing to do. I mean, they may not be part of the design partnership, or they may not be paid from that perspective. But getting validation from dozen other customers, reaching out to them, reaching out to your contacts in the network to figure it out if that solution will be valid for them, and just really building in things and having a faith in that in your technology, and building the proper product properly is built as a proper SaaS that can be consumed as self-served down the road to those other customers. And once you're done, the good thing about having those design customers or customers who are ready to work together is, once you build the solution for them, then and get launched, make sure it's oiled out and ironed out, you can reach out and now, hey, by the way, we remember the conversation we had? Now we have a solution. Do you want to try it out? And just really expand from there, right? And so I think it's the problem lies when people don't follow the philosophy, when people don't follow the process, right? I think this is a time-tested, and I think time and time again, we have talked about with AWS as well so many times in other podcasts as well. This is a time-tested machine, and AWS as well. I mean, whole AWS I'm not going to speak to specifics, but whole AWS was built like that. I mean, this is the philosophy of one of the biggest, enterprise existing out there on the planet, right? To how they were successful in terms of following this process. So it's something that has been proven left, right, and center. It's just you have to be disciplined and follow the process.
Love it. And speaking of AWS and Marcus, one of the things you said is, in working with Checkly, it was pretty easy to tell, these guys get it. Their growth is exponential and they understand. Just not to put you on the spot, but you do work with a lot of startups. Is there any time where you come in and see someone and work with a group and you're going, I'm concerned. I'm not sure these guys get it. And because again, they're not following the AWS, they're not following the pattern and they're trying to invent their own thing, or they think they have product market fit and they don't. And so, I mean, you talked earlier about, what Checkly is doing right. Do you have any examples out there, some folks that you've seen or that just didn't work out or you don't think are going to work out?
Yeah, totally. So, I mean, just talking to the points that we just mentioned here, like, how do you come from one big customer to multiple of them? I think it's very tempting, right? If you have the first really large name to kind of fall into the trap of a sales-led growth. That's what I call it, right? So the sales team comes back from a meeting with this big customer, with this big brand, and has a bunch of, requirements under their belt, and they now bring it forward. And it feels like, you have, stop the engine and fully go into that direction without, the discipline was a good word that I heard from Kamal, right? Without, having a really good product practice and a discipline to say, hey, hold on a second, this is really in line with our product vision, or, are we just building it now for the sake to make this one customer happy? And I mean, it's not as simple, right? I mean, on the one hand side, you maybe, you may need, I would say, I need the money, right? You want to have this brand and keep them happy. And so you need to come up with a solution not to lose them. On the other hand, maybe there are multiple ways to do it and not necessarily to build it into your core product unless you have the conviction that this is something that will work out good for a variety of customers. And, I mean, it is something where I would say that's the litmus test for many companies, right? So if they go to the route of putting this into their products, they may end up very quickly with a product that is full of, inconsistent features, let me call it like this, right? So there is a little bit here, a little bit there, but they are not doing, one thing really, really great. And I'm not saying this is a deal breaker going forwards, but this gives them a very hard time later on to iron all these things out. And so I can highly encourage to think twice or three times before making a decision, like creating a liability in your product based on a single customer's, requirement.
I like that a lot. And I do. So what I heard from Kamal is, have your design partners and, trust your design partners, and you don't need a ton of them. And I heard that actually from all of you guys, in which, hey, I have my first couple of customers, they're bought into my platform. And so they're bought into my success, and therefore we're going to work together to make the journey better. Are there any cases where you guys would be willing to take on a design partner that is a potential customer? And so if you walk in the room and someone says, hey, here's all the things if you do all these things that I may or may not buy from you, but at least you're in the realm. And so I only ask that because all three of you, or all four of you, have mentioned design partners that you trust, which are, again, already bought into your platform. But, Daniel, is there a case where even you guys are going to say, listen, going into this customer gets me into a whole bunch of other customers who look just like it, I'm willing to make that investment?
Absolutely. I think it's also part of us being we always try to be very innovative, right? So we never wanted to build, so we never just wanted to stay still. Like, we always try to innovate and disrupt, right? So one thing that I will say we are working on right now is a new AI project. I mean, obviously many companies are doing that, But for us, the the question was, how can we solve a customer problem using LLMs that we couldn't solve before? So we did a lot of product, research, and we talked to many companies and trying to understand, what would that problem be, right? So finding basically like a series of problems, and then we started super broad, and now we went super small, but we have found something very interesting. And this is, for example, when we try these new product ideas, right? That's not the first time we do that. For the AI project that I'm working on now with the team, it seems like we actually have something. So this looks really good. But also before, right? So we had projects, like we tried to build, when was it? 2 years ago. We tried to build a project that would sync your entire monitoring configuration with GitHub, right? We called it GitHub Sync, and we worked with a very early customer who didn't actually pay us a lot, right? But we felt like they were ahead of the market and they would probably be a good customer to talk to. So yeah, we totally do that, right? We work with them. We also get feedback from them, even if they're not yet fully committed. And yeah, I mean, sometimes that fails, right? So GitHub Sync is gone from Checkly. There's no documentation anymore. It's sunset. It wasn't a success. So unfortunately, we failed with that one. But yeah, it's absolutely something we're willing to do, right? It really depends on the state of the feature or the new product that we're trying to build.
And
Yeah.
that's a very great insight, actually. Just highlighting the insight, what Daniel is pointing out is that when you're in a startup, you really have to be, I guess, scrappy is probably a strong word, but you have to have a bias for action. You have to have, a great inclination of building a minimum viable product and just really test the market, because sometimes what happens is, as Daniel pointed out, in order to get signals, you may need to show something, and the buyers may not have the vision and understanding and education of where the world can be and how it better can be. So sometimes a demonstration, or we say many times, picture speaks 1,000 words. So sometimes a demonstration of the product speaks much more than the words we can put together. And I think that speaks to the point. So I think the biggest insight is, I think, having the agility to be able to just put together a MVP quickly, show, and just really talk to people. And it's okay to fail. The startup game is experimentation, and I think the AI era and the new era that we are in is going to become more and more experimentation. So the companies who are going to succeed is companies who can actually do experimentation better and can learn flexible and understand the dynamics of how the industry is moving and adapt to it. And the companies who just not going to do that are going to be doomed and going to fail and not able to succeed.
Yep, I can give you maybe a short, I'm fully on board, right? Like, you have to be scrappy. Like, I'll tell you how scrappy the AI project was, right? So I built the first part of it on an airplane, and then for the first month, it was running on my personal render account and used my personal Open API credits, right? That's how scrappy we are as a Series B company. So yeah, I totally agree. I mean, it's not like that anymore, of course, now that we have the first customers using it. But yeah, I totally agree.
And that goes back to the point that Adarsh was making earlier, right, about the reliability aspect and the the requirements. Because so once you have found the product market fit, once you've identified, yeah, hey, we have hit something, a lot of customers are asking for it, then you have to make sure that you can't just leave it like that. Then you're asking too much. But you have to get to a point where it's reliable, it's operational, it's performant from the perspective, it meets the needs of those enterprise check marks. But I think that's a usual second step, and I think people, often, it's easier said than done. Where people, as engineers, we sometimes can get lost into building everything perfectionist, right, and waste a lot of time and energy in that way, because it reduces our ability and agility to do the experimentation.
We sometimes say also, like, what brought you here won't get you there, right? So I think there are sometimes kind of pivotal point. Maybe that's a big word, but you can start scrappy, but then if you see that this turns into a proper product, maybe then is the point where you say, okay, I need maybe even throw away the MVP and build it in in a way that is then really serving professional, is working in a professional context with all the necessity when it comes to resiliency and security that we heard before.
Exactly.
So from the Plotline point of view, how do we? So let's kind of talk about the vertical aspect of it. So we heard you hit product market fit, and then your customers start telling you, here's what we need to do and here's what we need next. That then leads to a pretty clear roadmap that's customer driven, but we're also hearing design driven and having a bias for action on your own and staying true to your vision. And so do you have any learnings there to share with us in terms of, how are you balancing your customer needs while also staying true to your vision, as well as staying scrappy and trying new things? And so is that something that only a Series B company gets to do? You get to try new things at Series B, but at Series A, you have to stay focused? Or so where are you guys at on that journey, and what you're kind of learning so far?
Great question. So our primary users for this tool are marketers, and think of them as extremely creative people in all these companies, right? So a lot of times we are surprised by the way they use our platform. So they create things and we are blown that, something like this could be created from the platform. And we see that happen multiple times. So they sort of stitch together 2-3 things, use some APIs and build like a workflow that we wouldn't have imagined possible. So one thing that happens is because these customers use it in a lot of different ways, across a lot of customers, we see some patterns that, hey, look, 8 of these customers are trying to use the same workflow. It may not be exactly the same, but they're trying to make the same thing work. Can we make that experience much easier for them? So that's one of the proactive work that we do. Like maybe today they are stitching together, operationally difficult. They're every day coming and trying to set up something. Now, can we automate that into a workflow that one click they can deploy and run, which makes it easier for others to use? So that's one type of use case discovery for us. Second, again, they are very vocal. So they come and tell us, hey, look, we saw this in this other app and we want it here. So again, we get a collection of feature requests, and fortunately, we see that a lot of times it repeats. So we see in the same week, this 5-6 different customers asking for the exact same thing. So that makes it easier for us that we know, okay, if we build it, we at least have 5 customers to start using this right away. But apart from these two, I think it's also important to have a product vision of where you want that product to go to. Maybe it's things which are not there in the platform, because customers just see what the product is today and they tell you, okay, I want this, I want that. But only we as builders can tell, okay, this is where we want it to go. And that would require 2 or 3 bets that you have to take. And sometimes customers will, if you just ask them at face value, hey, do you need it? They'll be like, maybe not. But when you build it, put it out there, sometimes they'll have that feeling that, hey, okay, I want to try this out. And you have to place those 2-3 bets, and one of them usually works out, is what I've seen.
Love it. Going back to the fail fast statement that both Kamal and Daniel brought up. So Daniel, if you can walk us through, what was your decision to turn that off? I mean, so were you guys, how easy is it to actually make a decision to say, hey, didn't work, let's go a different direction? How can you, as a group, kind of let yourself go with an idea and find a new one? And so, is that easy as long as you have the right team, or is that something you kind of always have to ask yourself the question, hey, is it lack of innovation? Do we need to work harder on this, or is it time to go a different direction?
Yeah, I think that's one of the most difficult conversations to have, to be honest, right? Because like we pursued like a product vision that we call monitoring as code, which has been super successful for us. And I think we pursued this for 3 years, like, trying different angles and trying different pivots. And then the first few attempts like would fail, and then, the delivery didn't work out. And then we had a postmortem, right? And we all talked about it. And it was a very heated conversation, which led us to ditch the project entirely, do something else for 2 months, and then go back to it, right? Because we were all like sometimes you were just high conviction, right? You really believe that something can work, but it just takes a while, sometimes even for yourself, to realize what is the best solution, right? Like you definitely see the problem, but sometimes, yeah, it just takes a while to build a solution that has really good product market fit, and where you have the feeling, okay, this time we nailed it, right? So this was one project where we had this kind of conversation, and I think a good answer that I can give is, and something that I believe works really well at Checkly, is that you have to be okay with having really uncomfortable conversations about product success, right? Like you should not hide things, right? I mean, we have mixed panel, of course, so you can see exactly how successful or unsuccessful something is. And this can be a painful conversation. I mean, if you're a product manager and you basically have to tell the CEO, hey, I've built something for 3 months and nobody's using it, it's not a great conversation to have. But I think it's very healthy, right? It's like to have this conversation and then really make a conscious decision. Okay, we have literally zero usage. We were just wrong, and everybody has to admit that. And also the consequence. Like this is something we as engineers, we always talk about no blame culture, right? When it's about building resilient systems, and you do have to establish something like this also in the rest of the company, right? So taking risks, as we all know, is part of being a startup, and taking risks means sometimes things fail, and then there needs to be an environment where you feel it's okay. It's sometimes also safe to fail, right? And I think this is something that we do really well, like really challenging each other really, really hard. Like, sometimes you walk out of such a meeting and you're completely done for the day. But I think in the end, this is good, right? Because of course, I mean, the conversations are respectful, but the results are good, because we make these decisions, right? We see the GitHub Sync feature, of course, there were like high hopes, and people really invested and they really worked hard on this. And then you have to have the conversation at some point, and you look at the usage and you're like, okay, this didn't work. Shut it down. I think this is very important, having this culture of transparency and challenging each other, I would say.
Love it. And so I'm hearing from all of you a very clear message is, hey, we got to where we are by having customers we trusting in the vision, following that vision, and executing and delighting, and then innovating, which is the power of SaaS. Is I can innovate and I can give new features to my customers on a fairly regular basis. And we have a great example from Daniel of where you tried something and no customer didn't want it, which is also an amazing learning. But here's a question I have actually for all of you guys, which is, what happens if your customer says, hey, I really want X, and you as a team look at it as a startup, your job is to say yes. Is there any time you say no? Say, listen, that's not what we're planning to build. That's not who we are. As a startup, is it, if the customer says it, you're going to give it a shot? Or is there a time where you said, listen, I've got a vision and that's not it? So is there a time we're saying no?
100%. I think you have to, every time you're doing something, it's an opportunity cost. And you have to understand, among the other things that you have, is that the opportunity, like, is that worth it? And I think gone are the days when you can spend 10 years and finding the product market fit as a startup, right? You in the era that we are in, the new businesses, the modern business is going to be built. People are going to find product market fit in year, 2 years, right? And get the ground home running. And so it's really, really important to what you mentioned earlier about getting insights and really working with our customers closely and iterate, have a closed, tight loop. It's far easier said than done. Daniel pointed out one of the gotchas. It's just not the software aspects. It's just not about having a proper SaaS, getting insights and just doing and following the process or staying disciplined. It's much more than that. Sometimes things don't work. Sometimes you have to take hard calls, and just the human aspects that come in, and just being not emotionally get attached to something, and just be being practical about things and let things go. And sometimes when opportunity knocks on the door, even though it may look lucrative short-term, from the short-term perspective, you have to make the right long-term calls. And I think one of the leadership principles at Amazon, I mean, I'm so incredibly honored to be part of that ecosystem and learn so much at AWS. And one of the things I call AWS as a school that everybody should, if they get an opportunity, should go through at least a couple of years. But one of the leadership principles is about thinking long term and really just being a strategic. And Daniel also hit a point where sometimes you get a requirement, you have to be really clever and innovative about it, how you can position it. Are there ways that you can position it and make it such that you can meet the requirements in short term and strategically align from your longer term goals? You need to evaluate your choices, but there are times where you got to say no because it's just not aligned with at all and there's a bigger opportunity cost and you can have from somewhere else. But if you have nothing else to do, I guess take the call. then you're in that state, and it's totally fine to be in even that state, to just have something better than nothing.
I don't know if you want the rest of you guys want to jump in, but I do like the honesty to your true vision and the opportunity cost. Daniel, as you go from Series A to Series B, the opportunity, in theory, you got all this extra cash. You have opportunity cost to go try new things. Is that the time where you are trying new things, or is that time where you're doubling down on what you do well? So, I mean, when in your journey so far, do you think you were a little bit more? Are you more innovative at the earlier stage, and now you're a little bit more focused, or is it the same the whole way through?
Ooh, that's a very interesting question. So I think now we have more capacity, right? So we can actually say yes to things that we did say no before. Maybe to the earlier question, one thing that came up consistently was dark mode for Checkly, right? So Checkly was always light mode only as a developer tool. That's in 2025. That's actually questionable. We had a public feature request that said, "My eyes, they hurt when I open it." And this is one where we had to just consistently say no for 3 years because we just didn't have the capacity, and we had to innovate, monitoring as code, for example, where we were very convinced this would be turning out to be a great success. So I think we are still as innovative as we were before, but we just have more capacity now, so we can, say yes to some things that we just couldn't do before because opportunity cost, I think, is the absolute correct term to use here, which is also something that I always talk about internally, right? Like, you always have to make sure that you weigh shipping customer value with everything else, and then you have to look at what brings more customer value. Like, will somebody buy the product just because you have dark mode? Yeah, probably not. But what we're doing right now, we are indeed doubling down on what works well. So we have an entire team focused on making our Playwright integration the best in the market. And this is about to ship, right? Because we have identified, Playwright is what drives a lot of our success, and things we had to say no to, which is also interesting. So as you know, Playwright is an end-to-end testing framework, and of course people ask for Selenium support, and we would say no. It's just not in scope. It's also not in scope today, right? So we're not going to do that. We dropped support for Puppeteer because we felt, okay, it was too much maintenance burden, and we just want to double down on Playwright because we think this is the future for us. And so we kind of do both, I would say.
Love it. And so on the plot line, I don't know if you want to weigh in on any of those topics, but I do have one last question for you. Is you get kind of in the vertical you're in by just delighting your customers, figuring out what they need, and getting deeper and deeper into that space. And so when you look up, your product is very specific to tailored to this space and delighting them and moving it out. When do you know you're there? I mean, so when are you comfortable in saying, hey, listen, I know this vertical. I am very good at this vertical. And when, in your opinion, are you saying, okay, should I go look at other verticals? I mean, so, these gamers have this need, but it turns out, maybe a shop like LinkedIn, who came up earlier, might need some of this stuff too. And so when, as a founder, when are you saying, hey, listen, I'm comfortable in this vertical and I'm great at it, but I should start thinking about others, or is that a spot that you kind of ever get to?
So I think what I've seen is there's no like when you know that you've hit a certain understanding of a market, you don't have to ask that question to yourself. You know that, okay, like something seems to be working in this market. Your sales team is able to pull in a lot more leads for that specific market, for that specific use case. Things keep repeating quite a bit. We see that happen a lot. So what we have seen is in a particular vertical for a particular use case, if you've crossed about 10, 15 customers, we know the sales team is now able to sort of sell, sort of get them to use. They are happy with the product in the first week. They are scaling their usage. We know that scale is sorted. The sales team can take it from there. That's when the product team starts investing effort into seeing, are there adjacent geography or verticals that we can sort of unlock. Maybe for us, we started as fintech, then we moved to gaming, and now we are sort of exploring e-commerce as a market. There would be a lot of things that are common, but if we have to sort of get more and more adoption, the first few customers we work with sort of tell us that, hey, you know, this is what we need. This is what is working across verticals, but this is something that you need to do something for us, right? Like, for example, if you take fintech and gaming, the number of products inside the app are limited. It's just 3 or 4 products. But as you go into e-commerce, now there are 500 products, 1,000 products that the app is selling. So the architecture changes a bit. They need new modalities to be added. So that sort of learning happens. And I think this also ties into the previous question where each of these new verticals we try to unlock, these customers may make a lot of requests that, you know, only if you do X, Y, Z, we'll use the platform. And I think what Kamal mentioned is spot on. We have seen this happen quite a lot. I think as builders, we think, okay, like this feature is a week long, we'll build it, let's ship it, and let's get this done. But it rarely takes a week. You may ship it in a week, but every feature you build to get it to a really good state, it takes like 3 or 4 iterations, right? And before you know it, you've spent 2 months and you're still sort of fixing that and making it perfect. So it becomes really important that you're careful about what you're picking. And like Kamal said, it's important to talk to a lot of other companies in that space before you sort of write that line of code and commit yourself to that feature in the long run.
Love it. I think at Microsoft, we used to call it vaporware, where we go out and promise something and see if anyone bought it. And once they bought a bunch of it, then we actually go about developing it. Wouldn't recommend that, but it was pretty successful for a lot of years for us. And so with that said, we are at the top of the hour. I really, really do thank everyone here for joining, and I hope you join us again. But I do want to leave the closing comment here to Marcus, primarily because we've talked a lot about builders and founders. And if you're a builder and you're a founder, and you're going to build a SaaS, and we all are believers in SaaS and think you should, you know, the most important partner you can have in SaaS is the largest cloud provider on earth, which is AWS. And I think everybody here has a great relationship and experience with AWS. Marcus, do you want to kind of just give the plug for founders listening in here, be it European-based founders who can kind of, you know, work with your team, or US-based founders, or the India-based founders? Why is AWS kind of the partner, the partner everyone should start with as it relates to building out their SaaS business, and how to start?
Cool. Yeah, happy to do so. So I think what is setting us apart from maybe other companies is we don't want to be seen purely as a technology vendor, as a cloud infrastructure provider. We really want to make sure that the startups we work with are going to be successful. Of course, that's not fully into our control, but it's way more than to provide infrastructure. It's provide founders and engineering teams with learnings that we have seen from other companies, bringing them together potentially even, right? So that they can have a peer conversation and really figure out how others that have been in their shoes a few months before, how they kind of perceived it, how they kind of solved it, and these kind of things. And of course, you know, also driving this home and build repeatable assets like blog posts or videos and the likes. But I would tell that we have this internally, this thought of, if we want to be successful, right, we should make them as successful too. So I think we are aligned in our intention and in our goals, and this is very powerful, because this helps us to think in the ways of, hey, if I want to, make more business with Checkly, just for instance, I should better take care that Checkly, is driving really well on the market, and then their tailwind will probably have a fair share as well from their success. And that what it leads to is then also to think of all the go-to-market strategies that we can do together, because technology is certainly an essential point, but at the end of the day, the success is determined when your product is on the market, and you need to find the right buyers and the right buyer personas and the right entrees to all these kind of circles. And here I think we have developed over the years a pretty strong playbook. And I think that together with the infrastructure that we can provide, makes us a very powerful partner.
Love it. Thank you. And thank you, actually, everyone here for your partnership and for willing to take a little bit of time and share your learnings as builders on your journey so far, because the goal is to move the industry as a whole forward. And the more success we all have, the more fun we all have. And so at the end of the day, yes, we want to be successful, but we also have fun. And building successful SaaS businesses is fun. And so thank you all. I hope you will actually consider coming back for one of our other topics, because I think we've just barely scratched the surface with both of your learnings. But with that, catch us in 2 weeks for episode 7 of SaaS Monday, Live on Friday. Thank you, everybody.